Hi, in this talk I would like to give a short overview on computational models of atopic dermatitis. I'm Reiko Tanaka from Imperial College London. The goal of AD research as a research community can include these 4 tasks. Whatever the approach we take to obtain the data, either using in vivo models, in vitro models, in silico computational models, or combinations of different modeling approaches, we want to understand disease pathogenesis, predict the effects of different treatments for each patient or a group of patients, stratify the patients based on phenotypes or the effects of the treatment, and eventually design personalized treatment strategies. However, as we all know, it is not an easy task given the complexity of AD pathogenesis. One of the difficulties is the need to integrate different types of dynamic data to achieve a system-level understanding of AD pathogenesis. The data is collected across different scales, from genetic, molecular, cellular, organ, even to population levels, and at different time scales from seconds, hours, days, months to years. Computational models could provide a systematic framework to tackle this difficulty and integrate different types of dynamic data to extract the information that is hard to be obtained from individual studies. Computational models can then be used to test hypothetical scenarios that are often difficult to be tested in real experiments or clinical trials. As we all observed abundantly since last year, when many computational simulations were used to design the governmental decisions on interventions for COVID-19. And the computational model and the results of the computational modelings are expected to explain complex pathogenesis, system-level dynamical changes, and patient variability. Extracting the information from the data and making the most of it to improve decision-making requires these 4 types of data analytics. That is, descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive analytics. We first need to describe what actually happened. In our case, how the AD symptoms changed over time to understand the situation. Then we diagnose why these changes occurred to elucidate the mechanisms. We can then predict what would happen based on what we learned from the past. In our case, understanding of the mechanisms will make it possible to predict how your AD symptoms change in future. Finally, using the prediction, we can prescribe how can we make the desired changes happen. For example, which treatment we should use to achieve the disease remission or to avoid AD flares. From the next slide, I would like to show examples of computational models of AD that are relevant to each of these 4 types of analytics. Firstly, for descriptive analytics, there have been some works that aim to obtain AD severity scores objectively. It is to address the issue of inter- and intra-observer variability of the currently available severity scores that are used to evaluate the dynamic changes of the AD symptoms over a period of time. To address this issue, Examanet has been recently developed. It is a computer vision pipeline for automated evaluation of AD severity from digital images using convolutional neural network models. Examanet makes probabilistic predictions of the severity of 7 clinical signs of AD for each digital image. There have been also several works that try to identify a set of biomarkers whose weighted sum can be used to replace the current severity scores. However, these severity biomarkers were not yet confirmed by cross-validation. Next, For diagnostic analytics, several computation models were developed. For example, a pathway model was developed to elucidate the different mechanisms of action for topical betamethasone and pimecrolimus. The pathways were identified by pathway enrichment analysis of transcriptomic datasets of patients with AD. Pollack et al. Developed a stochastic petronet model that delineates genetic regulatory mechanisms responsible for immune responses in Langerhans cells. The model describes reported interactions between interferon regulatory factors, interferon regulatory factor transcription partners, and DNA sequences in a logic-based diagram. The model predictions were validated by in vitro experiments. And finally, Dominguez-Huttinger et al. Developed a multi-scale mechanistic model that describes the dynamic interplay between skin barrier function, immune responses, and environmental stresses that determines AD pathogenesis using hybrid ordinary differential equations. And this model further inspired several models for predictive analytics, as shown in the next slide. The first one is a mechanistic machine learning model whose structure was inspired by the multi-scale mechanistic model. The model was developed based on clinical trial data and can make prediction of severity scores on a daily basis for individual AD patient. Another predictive model was developed by using a quantitative systems pharmacology approach, which is a combination of mechanistic modeling and PK/PD modeling. The model by Miano et al. Reproduced reported clinical efficacies for 9 biological drugs by describing systems-level AD pathogenesis and predicted the clinical efficacy of therapies on virtual patients. For prescriptive analytics, again, the multi-scale mechanistic model was used to design optimal regimens for proactive therapy. It was achieved by application of optimal control theory from engineering disciplines. The quantitative systems pharmacology model is more suitable for drug discovery. For example, this model by Miano et al. Suggested that inhibition of IL-13 and IL-22 as a promising therapy for dupilumab pro responders. So here I showed some published models for each of the 4 types of data analytics, and in summary, I hope that you could get the sense that computation models can provide a systematic and mathematical framework to integrate data of different types, create knowledge base for mechanistic understanding, and could help decision making based on system level dynamics. I'm sure more computational models of AD will be developed in future, maybe by a combination of different modeling approaches such as mechanistic modeling plus statistical modeling, including machine learning, as exemplified by the mechanistic machine learning models shown here. The choice of modeling approach should be tailored to the questions we want to answer and the data we want to integrate. While more and more data will become available, it is critical to make the data sharing much easier to make the research community grow to address the important questions. Computational models will be hopefully integrated as a part of the experiments and clinical trial design for AD, as is already the case for cancer research. For example, the computational simulations may help determine the number of study participants and the study periods required, and simulated patient stratification may determine pathophysiological backgrounds of the patients to be recruited. Finally, I would like to thank my group member and my wonderful collaborators for fruitful discussion and funding agency for my computational modeling work. Thank you for your attention.